Welcome to Environmental What Ifs, where we discuss if protecting the environment hinders your productivity, or more directly, can protecting the environment and being productive go hand in hand. I'm Dory Tilko. On today's podcast, we'll be talking about Denver's Environmental Performance Program. Let's get started. I'm excited to have Jeff Arneson, Senior Administrator in Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment's Environmental Quality Division on the show. He's going to share his expertise on managing and continuously improving programs that impact the environment and public health. Hi, Jeff, and welcome to the Environmental What Ifs podcast.
Hi, Dory. It's great to be here.
The Denver Environmental Performance Program, the DEPP, is part of an environmental management system. Jeff, what is an environmental management system?
It's a structured scientific approach to how we manage our job to be protective of the environment. An environmental management system is a way to put all of your environmental programs, procedures, goals under one hat. And it makes sense in my mind for the city because we have 27 different agencies. Sometimes there's different goals and priorities for each agency, and the administrative, the management functions reside within DEPP environmental quality, but it's a citywide program. The responsibility overall resides in each city personnel.
So are you the manager of this program?
I don't like to use that word manage. In the ISO 14001, the international standard, administer means the onus isn't all on me. The onus is on each individual agency to help me go after these environmental issues. Again, what might that look like? That might look like waste, stormwater, wastewater. There's so many different programs that we have to be mindful of as public servants, whether that's cybersecurity, whether that's the safety, which is super important, right? We want to go home the way we came to work. But yes, we have to be mindful of the environment and our impact on the environment.
The city was certified to the international standard called an ISO 14001. However, we lost that certification a couple years ago. What happened? How is it that we lost a certification?
ISO stands for the International Organization of Standards. It's a global standard for managing your environmental programs. So it's unfortunate. When the pandemic hit, so many things happened, and we all had to pull together to respond to this global pandemic. In the case of environmental quality, 90% of our personnel were pulled out for emergency response. And that's pretty true across all agencies. Environmental quality could not do all the things that we needed to, like audits, like different procedural things that we have to do every year just because of the standard. If we wanted to go talk to a shop or we wanted to go to an office environment, it just wasn't possible during the time. So unfortunately, the certification was a casualty of the pandemic. But we like to look at it as an opportunity now to rethink it. Everything's changed. How we do our work changed. Some folks have hybrid schedules. A lot of folks who were eligible to retire have. And so we have sort of newer Gen Y, and Gen Z are coming up. And so this is an opportunity not just to rebrand the program, but it's an opportunity really to redefine what we do and then how can we best manage those to be less impactful in the environment and then in some cases even be better for the environment.
Is this program driven top-down with management, or is it driven by the boots on the ground?
My answer to that is always both. So in the standard, if you read it, it specifically says that the system has to be top-down. And so we have it structured that way to comply and in order to certify and maintain conformance with the international standard. So the policy statement, it's signed by the mayor, and it is the first document you'll find when you click on our Power TMS website, which all you need is internet access, and you can access that document and our environmental procedures and other important documents. But it basically says, this is the program, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. And so it's important from my perspective to demonstrate that we have support from the mayor, that we have support from the appointees and leadership. However, I would argue that it's impossible to maintain or sustain a program of this nature, size, and complexity without support from the boots on the ground.
Every agency has a role in this program.
That's correct. And your role depends on the environmental aspects that relate to your job. Each person's job has its own impacts to the environment. Just by existing, we're going to have an impact. So what we do is we try to understand those and manage those. So if you have an office job where primarily you work behind a desk most of the time, there's still impacts to that. We got to think about composting, recycling. We have to think about what we buy. There's all kinds of different things. So just if that fits your job description, you're not off the hook. But there's other jobs too that also have large impacts, like, for example, fleet maintenance. They have to think about hazardous waste or used oil, or you're outside, for example, like Parks and Rec, then stormwater would be a huge issue. Think about what it is that you do on each day and how might those activities impact the environment.
Tell the listeners about the environmental procedures.
The idea behind the environmental procedures is to take any organization's activities, your operations, whatever it is that has potential to impact the environment, and have a procedure in place to mitigate those impacts. We're always going to have an impact.
And we didn't write these. We don't own these procedures. These are developed by different agencies, aren't they?
Yes. When you start a management system, which we're calling the DEPP, step one is to go out and talk to the folks about their jobs. What do they do? How do they manage things? And so we partner with each agency to write these documents. In some cases, they might be owned by DOTI. In other cases, a environmental procedure might be owned by Parks and Rec. But it's a way, again, to put everything under one hat. By having it housed in environmental quality, we're able to understand as the regs change, which they do quite frequently, and change those to make sure it's up to date. It's all of our responsibilities to check those documents and to know how we can minimize our impact.
A procedure on power washing would explain how to properly capture and divert that water so it doesn't have an environmental impact, correct?
That is correct. And if you happen to be power washing, hopefully you'll check the environmental procedure. It has to be only water. And then if it can't be run into some sort of pervious soil or garden or grass or something like that, then you have to collect it and manage it.
Where can you find these environmental procedures?
We've moved the DEPP documents to Power DMS, which makes it easy for anyone who has access to the internet to just grab those environmental procedures when they need to.
Is that just like a SharePoint? It's a platform where we're storing documentation?
That is correct. I'd like to think that it's better than SharePoint because we had so many problems a lot with our partners that are on different computer mainframes and being able to access SharePoint. And one of the nice functionalities about Power DMS, the reason that it's better is anyone can access as long as you have internet access. And it removes that impediment to being able to access the documents that you need to do your job correctly.
And you mentioned the phrase environmental aspects. What is an environmental aspect? And what's another way to word aspect?
Environmental aspect is part of the ISO 14001, the international standard lingo. And so I apologize because you'll hear it when auditors come through. You'll hear it when I talk, sometimes, unfortunately. I'd like to think of them either as activities or an operation that you do that has the potential to impact the environment. And that could be good. That's another misconception, is that an aspect is always bad, like, for example, spilling fuel. No, an aspect could be good. An aspect could be solar power that reduces pollution. Not buying something that you don't need could be a positive example too.
So we have these audits. Is this something that when you find out your group, your agency, your program is being audited by the Denver Environmental Performance Program, the DEPP, can they reach out to you for a pre-audit meeting?
Absolutely. Reach out to me personally. I've never turned down a request to do sort of a pre-audit visit because a lot of people, understandably, are a little anxious about it. Just because I've done so many over the last 12, 15 years, that I kind of know the types of questions that auditors ask. And I've noticed people that I do pre-audit visits with do great.
Are audits surprise? Like, surprise, we're here to audit you? Or are they pre-planned to give people an opportunity to pull their documentation together?
My program, the DEPP program, will never do a surprise audit. Now, that's not to say that couldn't happen, whether it's the state sometimes will do that to us where they want to see your waste streams or different things, or OPS might want to do a tank inspection, or the Air Pollution Control Division that's part of the state might do a real quick surprise inspection. But that's not something I do with my program. My goal is always to give each agency, each site or facility a minimum of a month notice.
What does it mean if you're being audited by the DEPP?
One of the four cornerstones of the DEPP program is checking. And so we do two different types of audits. We do an internal audit and an external audit. If I call you up and say, hey, I'm working on this year's internal audit and I'd love to come to your facility and talk about your programs, that should not be stressful. Or it's a conversation about your job. The external audit is a little bit more anxiety ridden in that there's a third party that we pay for to check to make sure we're doing what we say we're doing and that everything is in alignment with the international standard. And so they're going to ask probing questions. They might use words like nonconformities that might make you feel uncomfortable. But I would just stress that the whole idea behind this is a search for improvement. And even if we're at your facility and we find a nonconformance or we find an opportunity for improvement, try not to view that in such a negative light. Try to view that instead as constructive criticism and a way to help us get better.
What would be a common audit finding that comes up?
I would say a common finding in where you have so many different procedures. You're doing all kinds of mechanical work that could be in fluids like oils, that could be fuels, that could be solvents. And so a common finding we might have there is just mismanagement of those waste streams. Having really good housekeeping is great practice. And then knowing how to dispose of your things is another, you should really look up your procedure and use those lifelines. Ask questions if you don't know.
What would be a common audit finding in an office environment?
I would say that there's something that we've always been working on for folks that, primarily work behind a computer, and I'm one of those people. What do we purchase? How do we use the city's money? Oftentimes we find that folks buy things that either don't use or have some negative consequences with either disposal, and sometimes it's too much. So let's say we need a hand sanitizer, which is important, but we buy so much that it expires before we can use it all. Well, that's a big problem on the disposal side because that's hazardous waste. So I would just encourage people, if you're spending the city's money, really take that with a heavy weight. You're being entrusted to do that, and please consider the environment when you do that.
What's one of the biggest challenges you're facing with the DEPP?
There are a lot of challenges that we face with the DEPP, but one is awareness. How can we reach out to folks that just don't know about it? Especially coming back from the pandemic, that was a huge issue. A lot of new employees, some folks did early retirement. And so that's something that is high on my priority list, to really get our newsletters out, to really get out and about to the different city facilities. There's over 100 different city facilities. In that, there's probably close to 300 different structures that the city owns. I get a lot of different misconceptions with the Denver Environmental Performance Program and management systems in general. One of the big ones that I get a lot is, that a program doesn't apply to me because my job is such and such or such and such. And I guess I would say if the DEPP is really citywide, it's a mayor's program that I administer. It's one of the most important programs in the city to keep environmental issues front and foremost in everybody's mind. And I can't do it without the help of every single city employee.
Within an environmental management system, within our DEPP, there is the expectation of continuous improvement. What is continuous improvement and how does it impact city employees?
That's definitely a very important cornerstone piece in the international standard is continuous improvement. And the idea is that when you find problems, the idea of the system is to fix those problems so that you just keep getting better and better.
The environmental what if focuses on, can we protect the environment and do our job at the same time? For those employees who are doing more with less, stretched thin, have a lot on their plate, is continuous improvement just one more burden we're placing on them? Can we be productive and protect the environment at the same time?
It's not a question of if we can do it. We have to do it. As a city employee, as a public servant, we have to get out of this trap of thinking that's either this or that. I'd like to think that you can do your job and be mindful of the environmental aspects associated with your job. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that it's super important that everybody realize that it's really not an option, and we have so many resources available to help folks. So let's think about it as an and.
Thank you, Jeff, for being here today to talk about the DEPP program.
Awesome to be here. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode on the DEPP. If you have any questions about the things we covered on the show, you can email me at dory.tilco@denvergov.org, or you can find me visiting your shop with the tray of brownies at your next environmental training. Music has been provided by Colorado's very own High Strung String Band. This episode is sponsored by Power DMS, another software platform requiring a password you'll forget.